Hi, I'm Justin Moorman.
And I'm Katie Thornton, and this is the Re-Education of Schools podcast,
where we have open, honest conversations about how to better understand social-emotional learning, trauma-informed care, the whys behind student behavior, and how to help kids navigate it all as they go through school and life. All right, welcome back to the conversation. 99 problem solving with kids. If you're having behavior problems, I feel bad for your son. I've got 99 problems. But only a couple of them really have to do with kid behavior. They have to do with other things.
I was impressed that you could even pull off even some of that.
Kind of gangster, I guess.
I
We're excited to have you on for the conversation again. We're going to be talking today about problem solving with kids.
Yeah, this is the part that the behavior happens. Now what?
Yeah.
And we usually want it just to go away, and we'll ignore it and pretend like it didn't happen, and then tomorrow it will just magically not be there.
Yeah, as maybe the hope. Yeah, it's not
so
really how it works.
This is the time and
right?
effort part, and this is where I feel like people shy away from trauma-informed care because you got to put time in to solve the problem.
Yeah.
To improve behavior outcomes. So, anyways.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern around trying to solve the problem, right? Because I think we'll get into it. But there's a lot that goes into it. And as easy as it sounds to be like, hey, let's solve problems with kids. And I think most people will be like, yeah, let's do it. There's actually a lot of people that probably don't. And I don't think that's because they're like the worst or anything like that. I think it's just because of a lot of things that we're going to talk about in this episode.
Yeah.
And maybe not being super prepped for it. All right, so let's jump in. So I said research is showing us, right, that we have to change behavior and view behavior kind of through a new lens. So why is that?
Well, I think we just know way more about the brains and how they operate now. So I think we do a PD session on, one of our trauma series that we offer. We talk about school discipline and how it's changed, right? It was like, we'll just punish it out of them, and that will solve the problem. Or like public humiliate or shame, and that will solve the problem, right? And then all this research came out. It was like, actually, don't do that, and it's actually disproportionate. And so now we know a lot more how the brain works. So if we actually want to change kids' behaviors, we actually have to start thinking through how to establish those new neural pathways. So the science is pretty clear on that. So we really have to think about the neurosequential model and how humans operate and make sure we're getting basic needs being met, emotional, physiological needs met, and then before we can even access the cortex for learning. So there's so many things that we have to put in place now that we know about brain research and the nervous system and the impacts of trauma on the body and things that need to happen that aren't just a hard consequence and then, behavior is distinguished. We know just how societally has changed and how education systems have changed and public ed structures. We've got to start looking through it through a neurosequential, nervous system-based model that actually will change human needs for behavior outcomes.
Yeah. I think we look at it so much as for a long time, right, kind of what you were saying, is we've pictured this or looked at behavior as like, everything's just always a choice. And I'm not saying there's no choice in it, but when we have students that have maybe some tough behavior, but I think that there's also a lot of science that shows that there is only also so much choice, right? There's so many other factors that are preventing a kid from being able to learn, or that are leading to a kid operating as if they're under attack, even when they're not. And I think that knowing those things should help us adjust. We should adjust, as opposed to just being like, well, they're just choosing to do this, they're just choosing to do that. And if they would just sit there and be quiet and listen, then everything would be fine. But the reality is, even if they were sitting there and being quiet, they probably aren't accessing the higher part of their brain, and they wouldn't be listening anyway, or learning anyway. And I think that's a big thing for us to start to realize and make a shift with. I think the heart of it really is, for me, that we're always either just band-aiding a problem, or we're actually coming up with solutions. We're doing one of those two.
Absolutely.
All the time, right? And so for a long time, we've kind of gotten stuck into a real band-aiding things kind of spot, because initially it seems like that saves us the most time. And maybe is the least effort intensive. And I think that maybe it saves us the most time on the front end, it feels like, because we just have a tough situation that goes away. But I think on the back end and long term, it doesn't save us the most time. It actually costs us way more time to continually band-aid a problem than to come up with solutions for a problem that exists. And so I think that that's part of it for me, is like we've gotten into it's always easy to get into a really bad habit of just constantly band-aiding a problem and just trying to get stuff to like settle like in a moment. I think there's a time and a place for that. Like,
I was just going to say that sometimes you have to put the Band-Aid on to get people regulated to be able to solve the problem.
Yeah. It's not like that's always the worst thing or anything like that. But I do think if that's all we're doing, if that's our only solution, is to come up with these quick fix kind of, let's Band-Aid it, let's make it to where everything's like calm for the moment. If that's all we're doing, then we're actually wasting so much time in the end. And it doesn't feel like that because we're probably not operating in those moments in our cortex. We're not operating in that top part of our brain. We're not operating in a spot where we're thinking long term, right? We're operating in such a short term spot with our thought process that we actually can only think a few minutes ahead. And so we're thinking like, well, what solves it for the next few minutes, instead of being able to step back and think what solves it for 3 weeks, for 5 weeks.
So really you're talking about, like, let's just drop vocabulary for people, the state dependent functioning.
Yeah, sure.
So a lot of times when behavior happens, we're quick to want to solve the problem with kids at that moment.
Yeah, or we just want to solve the problem. Probably we want to do something to
the student instead of with.
Or for. Yeah, one of the ways. Yeah.
To do that. And that is not a great way to operate. Maybe talk a little bit through that. Like, why do we not want to just make it happen right now?
Yeah, well, because I think and I think we're going to ultimately end up getting to this, but I think part of it is that we're in the business of educating kids, right? And what we want to sometimes think that just comes down to academics, but the reality is a huge portion of that comes down to like how to be a good human, right? How to be a functional human that functions well. And if we are just taking a tough kid has some kind of behavior in your room, and we take that kid and we just send them off, or we say like, this is what's going to happen, and we don't get insight from the kid about it, then we may be trying to solve a problem, the wrong problem, because the kid may be able to say, well, the actual issue was X, Y, or Z. You tried to solve a problem and saying it was problem ABC.
Yeah.
And that's not even the right problem. And I think Ross Green does a great job of explaining all of that in some of his, and really all of his stuff. And I think the importance of doing stuff, therefore, with and having a relationship, doing it relationally. And there's a lot of tactics and a lot of approaches, I guess, and like skills that you can use to get to the heart of a problem and help a kid be able to tell you what the actual problem is. But if we're just doing stuff to kids or for kids, then we're never hearing probably from the kid and helping them be able to tell us what the actual issue is.
Yeah, and I think when we're dysregulated, we're just throwing out like consequences that are like so far ahead of time, which make no sense to us because we're just like not in that sense of like
do
time.
That again, you're going to have Saturday school on Saturday. Yeah. And that doesn't, is that actually solving a problem, or is that just, I'm mad at you right now?
Show you.
So I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now, oh, by the way, you have to run the Saturday school because you don't,
sure.
With all the consequences
you
and stuff.
Really think it through, right?
Yeah.
Aside from kind of that, it's just really best practice for kids. Again, it helps them become problem solvers themselves. I think that's the whole point. And that's really ultimately the idea of solving with kids. Like, what does this do? Is it not only helps problems get solved or issues that arise get solved and rectified, but it also actually teaches kids how to become problem solvers. And when kids learn how to become problem solvers, that leads to adults that know how to solve problems later on in life. And that's a problem we for sure are facing now in the world, right?
Adults
Certainly in our country.
To talk to each other.
We don't know how to do this, and so now we're kind of in the state that we're in.
Yeah, and I was just thinking through like what we know about building new neural pathways and how we're going to change brain-based behaviors. That you have to have consistency and predictability to reestablish those healthy neural pathways. So that's steady. I think you talk about a lot. It's like a steady drip, right?
Yeah.
That's how we change behavior. It's not like this big event with this giant consequence, and we got to start thinking through that. That's how neural pathways are establish that, and that really the change comes from us as humans to each other. That there's no like magical program or system you're gonna go purchase and be like, that's going to fix all the behavior problems in my school. Unfortunately, that's just never going to happen. There's things that can assist you or give you ideas or kind of give guidelines to help support some commonality for your district or school. But they're the people that work there. That's why we talk about people over programs. You invest in the people and their approaches and the tone of voice. And Edtopia, and maybe we'll link this when the episode airs, but had a great article came out, the top research studies of 2023. And one of them was the tone of voice.
Yeah.
For an educators' classrooms, right? Paired with, I think SEL was on there. It was like top 10 things, but some of the stuff was so much trauma-informed practices. But like you have to teach people tone and voice. Like that is an approach that you can't buy a program to teach somebody that, right?
Yeah.
Just the modeling the coming in with your calm meets their dysregulation. You can calm somebody with the nervous system.
Less about what we do. I mean, it is about what we do, but it's like less about like just actions and doing, and it's more about who we are and how we are being as adults. And I think those can sound like the same things, and there can probably be crossover between those two things. But I think it's more of that mindset. And again, there's not really a program you're buying, but it comes down to training. It comes down to people being trained and educated and having stuff explained. And then we were just talking about this off air, right? Like then letting people experience life and live it some, and then come back and train some more and talk about it more, and then go experience some more, and then go back and train some more. That's how this kind of works, but it takes time. It's not quick.
No, it's not a quick fix. And then you also have to have people that know a little bit about this to be able to even support and build vocabulary and model all those kind of things too. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so back on track. I feel like we were off track. What does Josh will get mad at us? He'll coming down hard on me for time.
Zapping us under the
what
table.
Does what does problem solving with kids then look like? How does this look?
Okay, I'm a big fan of Dr. Ross Green's work, so I feel like his collaborative proactive solutions is, if your district, we'll talk about this at the end, but if your district, that's one thing I would say anchor back and look at his work. Lives in the Balance, enormous amount of free resources for schools.
Something that we've done.
Something we've done. Yep, we've gone through the training, his advanced training, use the tools and resources. But here's the 3 steps for the Plan B process. He talks about Plan A, which is like, because I said so. Plan B, problem solving with kids. And his Plan C is drop it and let it go. And I think that's a big point that we need to talk through, is that not every problem has to be solved. Some things you just got to let go. Like, this is not the hill I'm going to die on today. We can't solve multiple problems. Kids are going to have an enormous amount of lacking skills.
Yeah.
But we got to prioritize and kind of think through what is the one thing we're going to start tackling.
Or that it's not the time right now.
Yeah.
To talk about it.
Doesn't
right?
mean we're
I
not
don't
gonna
have to solve it right now.
Yeah, we can let it go.
Down the road we might solve it, but it's not the big one right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So his Plan B step. The first thing is empathy. Really identifying, I think we talk about empathy a lot, considering and identifying concerns, articulating those concerns in a manner that others can understand, and like letting go of their strong emotions during this discussion. The second part is defining the adult concern, because your voice does matter. It's not like let kids do whatever they want, right? There's boundaries, all those kind of things. So I think dividing the adult concern goes back to listening, empathizing, considering and understanding another person's perspective, appreciating how one's behavior is affecting others, and tolerating frustration when hearing another person's point of view. And then the final step is the invitation to solve the problem. So those 2 things have to happen. Like, and same goes back with restorative practices, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the same thing, it's that here's how I felt and here's how you felt, and like how's your impact back and forth, right? And then the invitation is generating alternative solutions, thinking of solutions that not only works for oneself but also for others, considering the likely outcomes of potential solutions, and resolving disagreements without conflict. Is basically how his collaborative proactive solutions work. But then you look into another avenue, which we've also been trained as restorative practices, kind of the same thing. It's those restorative justice conversations that go back and forth, looking through that as a model and thinking about what are we going to do with kids. So really thinking through those long-term outcomes for kids, and it goes back to, I know you love when I keep on talking about the tier approach, but MTSS, it's
I don't dislike the tier approach. I just think you to make sure you explain it.
That's okay. So we look through the tier 1 approach,
again with the tier 1 approach. I'm just kidding.
So we look at building community circle, right? So having platforms already, if we're about problem solving with kids. Sometimes it's individual problems, but sometimes it's more community classroom-based things that some kids get targeted for, where it's like this kid's problem, but actually like 3 or 4 other kids probably need to be talked to about. So think about those tier 1 approaches as your community circles where we're solving problems within our community at first. Then looking at the restorative circles to repair relationships is that tier 2 approach. And then we have the support circles for re-entering back into learning environments. So I think sometimes we're really quick to be like, this is a tier 3 level behavior issue. Then sometimes we can go back and really solve these at a community-based tier 1 level with the whole community investing into it.
Sure.
So I just want to encourage people to don't always think it's like this individual kid with this individual problem and you're out.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is the case, but really look at it as a more holistic, through the MTSS lens, what can be solved at each one of those levels.
Yeah. My way less official take on this question. No, I think that's all that stuff's good. Again, I think that there's so much that goes into some of the trainings that we've gone to. So whenever we reference trainings, I think there's a good spot to say that. Like, we give like some like incredibly brief overviews of what it is.
Yeah.
Don't take that as like, now I've been trained in whatever. For sure, check out some of the stuff that we reference, because we've really tried to kind of hit a wide variety of different voices that have trained us, and not just to be always completely
all in on
just one. And I think that thinking to the people that have trained us or that we've been to trainings from, I think all of those people would probably say the same thing. Like, it'd be like, it is good for you to hear all kinds of different voices and to utilize those. But yeah, just don't think that we've given you all that there is to know about any of those things. All right. So for me, like, what does this look like with kids? Problem solving. I think that the first thing it has to look like is you going into it with an open mind. I think you kind of referenced that, right? Like, I think that we're really quick as adults to assume that we know what the problem is. I know what the problem is. I saw the problem. The kid is not turning in their homework. That's the problem. Well, is it or is it not? Like, oh, this kid likes to make everybody laugh in the room. And this kid always comes in late from, fourth period. He never gets here to fourth period on time. I know what the problem is. Well, I think we have to go into problem solving with kids, with students, as really having an open mind and actually trying to hear what the problem is. Because if we don't know what the problem is, then we're going to, per Ross Green, right? He talks about it a lot. We're going to be solving a problem that isn't a problem. And then we wasted a bunch of time trying to solve something that really wasn't the main issue overall. Another thing that you referenced was that empathy. So that empathetic listening, or like tactical empathy, is what Chris Voss references it as. So he always references it as using empathy as a tool, right? So using it like on purpose and using it as a tool. So this actually takes more time, right? And do problem solving with kids does. And it's usually one of the problems that we have with it in education, is that it takes too much time. This is going to take too much time. So the way that Chris Voss defines tactical empathy is like the deliberate influencing of your negotiating counterpart's emotions for the ultimate purpose of building trust-based influence and securing deals, in his word. But the reality is, like, if you're trying to get anybody to do anything, you're basically in a negotiation, is what he'll always say, right?
Yeah.
And so welcome to the world of teaching, right? You're constantly trying to get a whole room of kids to do something.
Yeah.
You are constantly negotiating with a whole room of students, individually, collectively, whatever it is. And so what we're saying is, or what he is saying, and what I always resonates with me, is this idea of influencing the emotions of our counterparts to be able to like get us to the spot we want to be in. It sounds manipulative, and I guess maybe if you were evil, you could make it manipulative, right? Like if you wanted to become evil with it, you could do that. But the ways that you employ your voice, like the labels you use, mirroring people back, like all these things are part of this like purposeful tactical empathy, right? Leaving silence. I think those are things that we don't do well a lot. Like we want to talk. Not pointing any fingers about somebody who struggles with silence, but sometimes we struggle. Sometimes we struggle with silence. I don't know. I don't know who it could be. There's 3 of us in this room, so I don't know who it would be. But no, I think listening, like think about those things. They match up with the stuff that you're saying from like Ross Green, from the restorative practices training, right? I lost it there for a second. These things match up. And when you start seeing that things match up across different platforms, right, we really probably should pay attention to them, right? So voice, employing your voice, tone of voice was one of the things you brought up,
Yeah.
right? Labeling and mirroring back, right? So it's just good practice when you're working with somebody is to be able to like say something back and give them the opportunity then in silence to be able to correct you or affirm what your assumption was that
Yeah,
you just
I
made,
catch
right?
you doing that to me sometimes.
Do I?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I do. We'll never know. But I think that there's value in that, right?
Yeah.
Because then you not only helps you understand, but it's actually helping, especially in the world of small kids, especially, but I think also with older kids, we're helping those small kids actually find out what it is that's the problem. I think with older kids, it's really helping them have permission and giving them voice in a way that shows them like you actually are caring what they say and helping them think that through a little bit, right? But it takes time to sit down and have a conversation. It is a lot quicker, it seems like, initially, to just make a decision and be like, this is what the problem is, I know what the problem is, and here's your punishment for it, right? That's quicker. But is it actually quicker? Does it save the most time in the end? And then I think ultimately the goal of this is letting the kid and teaching the kids how to solve the problems themselves and with others is really what we're getting at. Do we want that individual problem solved? Yes, obviously you do. But we want to get to a spot where we are helping kids know how to do that themselves so that, again, they can either help them throughout their schooling career solve problems that they might come in contact with, or even as adults that we're able to help them solve problems because they've learned how to do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, everything you just mentioned was good problem solving, even for adults that we see them struggle with.
Yeah.
People are upset with you. They can't come talk to you. They don't know how to come approach the problem or come talk to you directly. Do we see that? Like that,
Yeah, that happens a lot,
it's
right?
hard. People are afraid of or not sure how to address conflict or disagreements or question, doesn't always have to be confrontational. It's okay to come up to somebody and say, I'm not sure why you're doing it. Can you talk to me a little bit about more? I don't think I understand what's the holistic picture is right now.
Yeah, we see it from colleagues for sure. You can see it from parents in your room for sure, right? Who might get really upset about something and they don't even come and talk to you as a teacher about it. And you're thinking like, we actually could have solved this. But like we've for so long, we have just eliminated taking the time to solve problems. I think I don't have some like research thing I'm going to pull out, but it just really seems apparent that for a long time, what we've done is like, hey, here's a problem. Let's remove what the problem looks like. And then let's pretend like it never happened because we have to move on. We have to teach.
Yeah.
And then what we've done is we've taught kids to just avoid and ignore problems instead of solving them.
Yeah.
And now we have a bunch of adults that we all are trying to learn as adults now how to work through and best solve problems.
Yeah.
And, hopefully we're learning and getting better at that.
Yeah. Something I think continuously
Yeah.
I'm working on always.
Yeah. Well, sure. Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah. Hopefully we all are. All right. So what are some of the long-term outcomes of this work? Why should schools actually be invested in this? Why should individual teachers look into this more and try to improve in this area?
I think if we really care about kids and we really want to see long-term outcomes, that we really need to start looking at, and we really want to create, like you said, the problem solvers as adults. I think it's really critical we start teaching kids these skills and model them as an adult. So if we're not doing it with kids, they don't know what it's supposed to look like. They think this is how conflicts are handled.
Yeah, sure.
And so I think this is how our brains work. When we feel heard, seen, and valued, then and only then we're able to access the cortex for learning. So if we're about educational system, about educating and academics and all that stuff, you have to do this or kids aren't going to be available for learning. So if you want to see improved test scores, start doing this work and see what the improved test scores you're going to see for some kids and shifts. I think that's in creating, we really got to start working on creating and utilizing environments where kids feel safe, feel a sense of belonging, where relationship practices are strong, and that they feel okay to come to you vulnerably and say, that they can start being proactive about some of their problems and that we're not just solving problems in a reactionary manner. I think that's the real key.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, just beat a dead horse, I guess, but it's going to produce students who can problem solve on their own, which leads to adults that can problem solve themselves as well, and which is something that we really need. I think that the earlier, like just with anything, the earlier we can start doing this with kids, the more benefit there is, right? So if we're working on this as kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, elementary school level, that's going to have the most payoff because then we've created really young students who are capable of doing this and solving problems. I actually think the people that should push for this the most are probably secondary teachers. They should push
Yeah.
districts the hardest to do this, because it's going to benefit them the most long term, because they will have eventually, a handful of years down the road, have kids who have from elementary through middle all the way up into high school when they have them now, like that they've been taught how to do this and they've been working on it with teachers the whole time. I actually also think that the secondary teachers out there that are listening, you guys are actually probably better at this naturally, I would say, than elementary school teachers. I think that secondary teachers, I don't know if it's just a matter of kids seem older and they seem like they probably have more insight to help solve the problem with people.
Yeah.
Whereas at an elementary level, I think sometimes we're quick to dismiss the idea that the kid's going to have enough insight to help solve the problem.
Yes.
I don't think consciously, I don't think we would say that, but I think maybe subconsciously that's where we land sometimes. Whereas I think a lot of teachers of older students have a much more likelihood of sitting down to try to talk about and find out the reason why with a student. And so, if you're a secondary teacher out there, push for that, for being a thing, this problem solving with kids, like for the whole district, so that those younger levels, it's not just starting to happen when kids are older. I'm not saying that no elementary school teachers do it, but I just think we're quicker to just do stuff to or for at the elementary level as opposed to with.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of where I land. And then this is going to, again, time. I'm a time person. I'm always a big thinker of how my time is being used, as Katie's well aware.
Yes.
And how much time something's going to cost me, all the things. And so I actually, that's the thing that makes me buy into this. I mean, beyond just it's good for humans. That's really the thing. I guess, maybe I should say that. Now I've made it a thing that's all about me. This is really why.
So it's about you. Cool. Yeah.
But the reality is it actually saves time long term. It's the same reason why you, as a teacher, classroom management wise, classroom regulation wise, we've tried to start saying some.
Yeah.
I think that we talk about hey, spend the first month or two really making sure that systems are in place, that kids understand it, that kids understand how the room functions, all those things, so that later, the other 7 months, 8 months of the year, the school year, you're in good shape. You don't have to spend nearly as much time on those things. Do you have to spend a little extra time on it early? Yes. But do you have to spend ultimately way less time over the course of the whole year on it? Yes, you do have to spend way less time because you've put in the work at the front end. It's that same idea. It's going to lead to less problems long term, and it's going to make you be able to solve problems with kids, probably less because they'll be solving some of their own problems, but then also it's going to take less time to solve the problems with kids because they understand how it works.
Well, I think if you spend a solid that first quarter of school, then when you get into the hardest quarter, in my opinion, is third quarter, you're prepping up for state testing and all the heavy standards coming, closing up, then that third quarter should run pretty smoothly because you've put all the work in the first quarter. And so then here you go, you're rolling faster, going deeper into learning and all those kind of things. Yeah.
So we kind of started to talk about this already, resources, professional development, kind of tools people can walk away utilizing to shift this work. Where are some places that you'd recommend people to start?
Yeah, I think we really try to be very realistic about stuff. It's not just about do all this stuff, right?
Yeah, sure.
So here's the realistic part, right? You're trying to make some shifts in your district or your building. First thing to do is restorative practice training. Go on to the IIRP. Look and see where there's trainers offering training, great training to go through if you're able to send some folks to training or get somebody trained in your district to be a trainer. I think that's going to be the major shift across education systems in our country right now. There's a great book. It's called Building Trauma-Informed Restorative School by Joe Brummer. I think if you're able to get that, if you can't do the restorative practice training, start with if you're a classroom teacher, don't really make those decisions about training. Think about that as a book study or to look into that. I cannot tell. This is probably the most important training to go to. Is the collaborative and proactive solutions training. It is offered
by
Dr. Russ Green.
Yep.
Dr. Russ Green, but it's offered. It's a 2-day virtual training. Dr. Russ Green actually does the training live. It's offered through several different organizations that will push it through virtual training. I think maybe we'll try to be good about when I see one come up, I'll post it on our Facebook page. But it's not super expensive to go through it. I think it's some of the best training we've ever been through. It's him live talking to you about how to solve problems with kids. So I can't say that enough. Go through his advanced CPS training on his website, which is Lives in the Balance, which is my second resource. His website, Lives in the Balance, has tons of free professional development resources, forms, click and print. Like, they have made it so incredibly easy for professional development and resources for districts, parents, families, you name it. It's all on there. And then his book study, I've done this in one of the schools I've worked with before. We did a Lost at School book study. It's one of his books. As a parent, I have done The Explosive Child, which is a great resource, another good book, and then Lost and Found for administration. So those are all good things to start shifting. And I think the other big thing is once you kind of have some training or some background, start thinking about your discipline policy protocols, providing professional development, and really walk the walk and don't waver once you do.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think one of the things that I've said about Ross Green's stuff when I first went through it, it's like a Ross Green commercial right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But like, I think one of the things that I've always thought when I went through it was a lot of people talk about stuff in theory, and I think that he landed a lot more on like a practical side.
Now
you can't completely systemize like how you do this because every situation is a little bit different, but about as close as you can get to like making a system for how to do this every time that's repeatable. I think he comes about as close as you can probably humanly possibly get for doing this in a school setting with kids. And I think that that's pretty valuable, and I haven't seen a lot of other people be able to do that. And so that's where I find the value is like the practicality of it.
Yeah.
His work.
A lot of the research is like the research or like all the neuroscience piece. I feel like
which is good.
I appreciate his work because it's like the now what?
Yes.
Okay, we know this stuff, this kid, right? And then, but his is like the okay,
it's like the
like,
practical side.
Yeah.
For me, you mentioned, which I knew you were going to, and I tend to have you answer questions first. So
you know me too
I
well.
knew you were going to like take a lot of the things I would have probably come up with anyway.
Sure. Okay, that's what it is. Yeah.
So it's not that you're more well-read than I am, or do more research or anything like that. I think that for me, I always come back to kind of very generically just wanting to know people well. Like if you understand how humans work well, I think that's also like a really great start, because then when you do come across good trainings that you can go to, or a good book that's real specific about this, you can start applying what not just what you've learned, but what we know overall about how people work. And I think that you can do that in a lot of ways that are less official. Again, I think like I mentioned Chris Voss's book, like Never Split the Difference, right? I think that's like a great one for like how do people work and and why. And actually, in some of his more recent videos, he even references all the neuroscience kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and it's interesting to start seeing people that aren't necessarily in education, that aren't necessarily somebody that's trying to, make a living in the education world of training people and whatever else. But that they're saying stuff that also matches up. And I think it helps me to have perspective that this is beyond just like a school world thing.
Or
this
kids.
is like a people thing. And so the more you know people though, and understand how people work. So find those kinds of books, I think. Find books, find movies, I think, find documentaries, find things that are just about people understanding other people better, even if it doesn't directly relate to problem solving.
Yeah.
And you start to learn, oh, this is how people operate. And then how can I take what I've learned in these other avenues that have nothing to do. So if you're not a big, which I'm not, I will readily admit, way back in the day when you interviewed me, you're like, what books have you read? What podcasts do you listen to? And I had to pull out like the one thing that I knew that I had like gotten trained in. But I just don't do that a lot. I don't live my outside of work life. I don't live it getting deep into education world kind of stuff. But I have found like a really large interest in like just knowing people. Yeah. And then I find how helpful that is to me. Like over and over and over again, how helpful it is to me with the kids I work with my colleagues, with parents. Like it just helps across the board. Yeah. Not knocking the education stuff. Katie's done a good job of helping me do way more of that. But I think if you know people, then you got a good leg up. So find those kinds of resources.
Yeah, my goal was to read non-education books this year. So I started with, I'm a big fan of Adam Grant stuff right now. Yeah. And then, but Brene Brown, a lot of her work ties into a lot of the stuff. Right? Yeah. Simon Sinek, so if any of those people speak to you, they all
and people that have like quick hits 30-second little clips on,
The
whatever,
TikToks.
yeah,
I think that's
Instagram.
what the kids call them.
I
Yeah.
don't know. haven't gotten that deep. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm too old for that. All right. What would you want people to walk away knowing from this episode or remembering?
I would say this is the hardest part of the work. This right here, the problem solving with kids. But it's the right thing to do. It's the research-based thing to do. And it's the humane thing to do. And I have this is sticking with me, and I keep on going back to it. This is, again, talking about Brene Brown. This is a quote from her. It says, integrity is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them.
Yeah.
And this is the walking the walk.
Yeah.
And that's the super hard part because people are not going to be happy sometimes when you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I would just say the time is worth it. Take the time. We all have 1,000 things on the checklist that we have to get done as teachers. I know that. We all feel bogged down by all the things that have to get done. I know that. It can be stressful. It can feel overwhelming. If there is something that's worth you missing a checklist item to do, it is this. Like, help kids solve problems with kids, build that relationship with them. It's going to give you a better relationship moving forward. And if you want to talk about something that's going to help kids long term, it's going to more than the math you're teaching, right?
Yeah.
Even more than like the reading that you specifically are teaching in that moment, more than whatever subject matter you're teaching for college prep, like whatever it is, teaching them how to interact with people and solve problems with people. That's going to be the thing that's going to make the biggest difference in their life. Take the time to do it. It's worth it.
Yeah.
And that's where I land.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, as always, we thank you guys for joining us in the conversation. We just appreciate having you guys listen. I don't know. It's always exciting to hear back from you. It's exciting to hear back from people from all over the place that we didn't know were listening and hearing feedback. Send us emails, leave comments on Facebook, I think would be an easy way to do it. Share the episode if you find that this is something that could be helpful and that there were resources that we mentioned in this episode, or that there was something we mentioned that it'd be great for the principal of your school to hear, like the staff at a staff meeting to hear, whatever it might be. Share it with somebody, pass it on, and as always, let's go out there and do the work.
Yeah, let's go do it.
Hey everybody, let's keep the conversation going.
Like and subscribe below and keep the comments rolling.